I'd like to bring in now Andrew Borene, Senior Fellow at the National Security Institute, a former senior intelligence official as well. Andrew, great to see you. So we just heard from Robert there. We know that Iran has launched more missiles toward Israel, has now targeted bases in Qatar, Iraq, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain. Yet President Trump is now saying this conflict could end, quote, soon because there is, quote, practically nothing left to target in Iran. What is your take?
I think, the president's right. There are 5,000 targets hit through very high precision, extremely high fidelity data. Really, we haven't seen this level of precision targeting at this scale, I don't believe, in the history of warfare. So, in many ways, the president is right that Iran's ability to do conventional military offensive threats is greatly reduced and will continue, I would assess, to be further reduced in coming days. That said, I think that there are very real concerns about Iran's unconventional, or what we would call hybrid warfare tactics, such as terrorism, proxies, and cyber offensive campaigns against Western targets.
So, Andrew, there are reports now that Iran targeted a bank in Tehran, so in Iran. It's one of the country's largest public banks. It has historical links to the military, and an Iranian military spokesman says Iran will target economic and banking interests linked to the U.S. and to Israel. So talk about that strategy and what that could mean going forward.
Well, I think it's clear that Iran is lashing out in every possible direction in an attempt to influence, and I'm not sure that terrorism works, but when we talk about attacking, financial centers, we talk about attacking technology companies that provide cloud services. We talk about social media companies. And we've even seen evacuations now of financial services and consulting offices in the Middle East as a result of these Iranian threats. So I'm not sure that it's a tactic that's going to work, very similar in many ways to their attacks on commercial shipping in the Straits of Hormuz and laying mines in that waterway. So, again, my assessment is that Iran does not appear to be backing down. And in many ways, I think they become more dangerous from these kind of what used to be shadow warfare through cyber means and their proxy terrorism around the world.
All right. So, Andrew, I want to listen to what we've heard from the president talking about the damage done to Iran's military.
Right now, they've lost their Navy. They've lost their Air Force. They have no anti-aircraft apparatus at all. They have no radar. Their leaders are gone. And we could do a lot worse to one another. We're leaving certain things that if we take them out, or we could take them out by this afternoon, in fact, within an hour, they literally would never be able to build that country back.
All right, so it certainly seems to be going in the way that the U.S. would want to. We heard those comments just moments ago from the president as he is about to board Marine One. But my question for you, Andrew, there are new reports that Russia is helping Iran with some advanced drone tactics and strategy. How significant is that if that is in fact true?
Well, I mean, I think it's to be expected, right? Russia, Iran, and in many ways, China has had a hand in it. They've tried to hide it in many ways. But there's been an axis of, countries, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, formerly Venezuela, and others that have been kind of forced into an axis of convenience as all of them seek to undermine what we think of as the free world or the world order and the economy that those of us in the West live in, and those in other areas like Africa and South America. And so I think what we are seeing again is, in many ways, a more dangerous phase as Iran and, its kind of allies of convenience like Russia and to some degree China working behind the scenes seek what we would call asymmetric tools to influence the United States or to give black eyes to the United States and its perceived allies. So, again, I think we're entering a very dangerous phase at this point, less concerned about the conventional threat because we're seeing ballistic missile capabilities, ballistic missile stockpiles reduced greatly. We've seen an expansion into those air defense pieces. So there is air supremacy, it appears, for the United States, which will be very helpful if there are local ground forces or local protesters in the future that organize against the Revolutionary Guard Corps and the clerical regime. But we have to, I think we have to look at this with very clear eyes and say we're entering a dangerous phase where the more desperate the regime becomes, the greater the risk is of these unconventional attacks.
So speaking of this dangerous phase that you're referring to there, we are seeing what's happening, Andrew, in the Strait of Hormuz, and traffic is essentially non-existent. We saw now reports of cargo ships being targeted. As this conflict continues, do you think the U.S. and Israel correctly calculated the risks to the global energy markets?
I mean, it's a complex question. I think in my assessment, we do see a wild card in Venezuelan-produced crude and what it might provide as a buffer to Western gas prices at the pump even. I was looking at some data on gas prices in Europe, the United Kingdom, Africa, South America, Brazil, and India and China. And all of those locations are seeing considerably more drastic spikes in a per-gallon price at the very end of that supply chain. That said, I think what we're likely to see is more U.S. naval or allied naval presence, especially as the Iranians are sinking ships out with Thailand flags, Japanese flags. The last one, I believe, reported was Marshall Islands. So these are not in Iran's traditional enemies or perceived adversaries, but Iran is definitely taking actions that are likely to result in more force and more public support for actions against their efforts to close the Strait of Hormuz.
All right, Andrew, Borene, really appreciate your insight. Thank you.
Great to be with you. Good to see you, Nichole.